All right, thank you very much and welcome again to this meeting of the End User Subsidy Lab. My name is Patrick Tonui, and on behalf of our partners SMAP and the World Bank, NDEV, the Africa Clean Energy Pro Technical Assistance Facility, and all our other partners, we want to really welcome you to this End User Subsidy Lab meeting. I think as we start off, I want to give you just a context on what the End User Subsidy Lab is about. And if you've previously attended our meetings, you would already be aware of this. As we've worked towards realizing universal energy access in line with the SDG 7 goals, it's become quite clear that while we have made significant progress in that regard, but really the challenge of reaching the very poorest, those that the latest studies have indicated would likely still be left or are at risk to be left behind towards 2030, it's become quite clear that these remain the poorest and hardest to reach the communities. And this is really driven by their ability to pay or affordability. And this is what we and other partners are calling the affordability gap. Communities that need to be reached and may want to have access to a modern energy product, be it a solar home systems or other access to mini grids or others, but they just cannot afford to pay. And unless something deliberate is done, these communities will be left behind. And it is with this respect that the End User Subsidy Lab was initiated by GOGLA with SMAP and the Lighting Global Program, African Clean Energy, Technical Assistance Facility, and NDEV, with the intent really to promote careful review, study, and of what's been done before in providing end user or demand side subsidies, which of those mechanisms have been adopted, what have been those elements, what has worked, and what has not worked. And the end goal really is to pool all our knowledge, all our learning, all our resources through the input and deliberations with other experts and other practitioners to really learn about what are the options out there and really to begin testing out new prototypes of smart subsidy interventions that reduce the price for end consumers, but also really build an ecosystem that is sustainable for the marketplace, but also for limited public sector resources. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So for our webinar today, what we are going to be focusing on, and I must note that this is now the 5th webinar of the End User Subsidy Lab series. We've looked at a number of previous subsidies, schemes that were taken and piloted or tried out in different countries from Kenya to Bangladesh to Rwanda and Togo. And this time we're taking a different view, and we are going to be looking at what the private sector has been doing in this regard. And the innovation in the company business models and the approaches that they've tried to reduce the cost for their consumers in terms of acquisition cost, and to really see what the impact of that has been. And this will be an opportunity for all of us to really engage on these models, to look at what they tried out, and we welcome you and really invite you to make sure that you do give your input. And let me go now to talk about how you can interact and engage in this subsidy lab. If you can, to the next slide. So how can you take part? We are using a Zoom webinar, Zoom meeting platform. And in this regard, we don't have a Q&A function, but we do have the chat function enabled. We're going to kindly request you, please keep yourself muted during the course of the webinar. When we go to the Q&A section, we'll ask you to raise your hand, and the raise your hand function is under the reactions. If you raise your hand, we'll be able to note that you'd like to ask a question, and we'll take your question. In the meantime, during the course of the webinar, if there's something that you are interested in, please use the chat function to raise your question. You can type it in. We will be tracking the chat function, and we'll try and make sure that your questions are addressed, or all of them are addressed. We will also ask you to kindly, if you've got a specific person or a panelist or a presenter that you'd like to channel your question with, please do use that function. And then let's go to the agenda for today. Thank you. So as I mentioned, I'm Patrick Tonui. I head GOGLA's policy and regional strategy work. And my colleague today, in case I have any connection issues, is Colin Gumbu, who's our policy manager. And we'll both be hosting this webinar together. We are really glad to also have representatives from our partners, NDEV, SMAP, and ACE also on this call. And at this point, I am going to transition to our first case study. As I mentioned, today we have two companies we'll be looking at who've been piloting innovative models to really reduce the price for the end users. The first one that we're going to be looking at is from Sunny Money. And I'm going to welcome Jamie and the rest of the Sunny Money team to talk to us about what they have tried out and piloted in Zambia. Jamie?
Great, thanks a lot, Patrick. Right, I'm just going to share my screen. So Patrick, if you could tell me that it's done all correctly, that would be great. So share. Can you see my presentation and it's moving?
Yes, we can see your presentation and it's moving.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. So hello, everyone, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jamie McCloskey. I am the Director of Development at SolarAid Sunny Money here in sunny London, where we've just peaked 40 degrees for the first time ever. So if you are in London, I hope you're keeping cool. So today, firstly, I wish I was here with my operations director in Zambia, Carla Kanyanga. She's the person leading this work, delivering this work for us in Zambia, but she's taking a well-deserved break at the moment. So I'm going to be diving into end user subsidies and the potential for profitability when using Pico solar products as a loss leader. So let's jump in. So of course, everyone on this call will know the reason why we're here. Many of you, if not all of you, are dedicating your careers, or at least part of it, to trying to solve this problem. But I just wanted to highlight this because it's so remind us why we are here. Of course, there's this 590 million people without electricity in sub-Saharan Africa. We have an African focus because of the high concentration of the problem, the highest concentration of the energy access problem being in sub-Saharan Africa. But in 2021, we saw a 4% increase of those living without electricity, predominantly due to the impacts of COVID-19. And this is before we've seen the impacts of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but essentially what that's done to the global supply chain, the increase in the price of global commodities. So by 2030, when all of us have signed up to achieve SDG 7, universal access to clean and affordable energy, we're way off. 570 million people by 2030 still will not have access to energy access. People in extreme poverty, which is a growing demographic, make up a large proportion of this figure. So we need to reach them. So that brings us to SolarAid and Sunny Money within that, and I'll explain what that means in just a second. This is our mission. Again, I'm sure many of you are saying, yeah, we agree with that. That's what we're here for. And for us, we know we can't do this alone, but we can play a unique role. So let's go to SolarAid to date. Founded in 2006, we've been here for a long time before there was any private sector in energy access. Investment was not really around. So it's a different landscape today, but we founded a social enterprise, Sunny Money, 2008, because we needed a more scalable, sustainable way to energy access. So without going into detail of our history, you can see some stats here to show we've had quite a wide impact. The 2.2 million solar products played a leading role in the catalyzation of the Kenyan, Tanzanian solar markets. And that's a key point I want to revisit on the next slide, because we were previously about scale. Like I say, there wasn't really many private players around. Knowledge of solar systems, solar products was low, so we needed to reach rural areas, and that's what we're here for. So we've gone from being the largest distributor of solar products on the continent, which was from 2012 to 2015, to focusing on what we can do that no one else can do. What is the unique role we can play, and why might that be useful to others? How can we capture what we're trying to do here and spread that further than our own scale and our own direct impact? And really, when thinking about that, that leads us to the three main barriers of how to achieve effective last mile distribution. You have awareness, you have access, and you have affordability. Within awareness, there's a big trust element, but this is the easiest way to summarize the three main barriers. Now, the slide before, showing the impact we've had today, fantastic. We've really been able to focus on and impact on the first two barriers the most, awareness and access. And we've been able to do that, and what has been called before cracking the code of rural distribution, through the inbuilt supply side subsidy that Sunny Money has, which is a business that's owned by the charity SolarAid. So we don't have the same pressures that for-profit businesses do to achieve commercialization. We can go to the places that are experiencing market failure, where there are no solar lights. So that's where we've really focused our energies the last 10, 15 years or so. And we have tried to push the affordability barrier as well. So I know a partner from Namane is on the call. Together with them, we were able to distribute the first ever sub $5 Pico solar lights. And we were the first to ever test pay-as-you-go in Pico solar lights with Greenlight Planet back in 2014, I believe. So we've really been trying to break this barrier, but we can't. The poorest families still can't access the most affordable products that are available to them. So that's why end user subsidies are needed. We've exhausted all other avenues, and we just need to start focusing more on what is needed by the last inch of the last mile customer. That brings us to end user subsidies. So I think a key point to mention here in our approach is it's not just focusing solely on 100% access, reaching everyone. We take very seriously the commercial aspect of this. How do we achieve market maturity? And how could potentially working with Pico Solar in the first instance lead to a long-term profitable business model? And that's what we're exploring here. But to go back to basics, what is an end user subsidy? I won't break it down because I'll assume everyone on here knows, but there's a description for you there. And we're actually running two what we call open source pilots. We're an open book. We want our models to travel much further than ourselves, like I say. The first one is subsidize Pico Solar as a loss leader. The second is subsidize energy as a service model with solar home systems. We're piloting that now in Malawi. Don't have enough time to go into that. So today we're focusing on the former, Pico Solar as a loss leader. So like I said before, in a nutshell, this model is selling subsidized Pico Solar products to achieve universal access in the first instance, while capturing the long-term business benefits brought by the utilization of these products as loss leaders, bringing us to market maturity and profitability. So how do we get there? Well, these are our objectives for the pilot phase we're in now, and I'll go into much more detail in a moment. So the first point is really key. We really want to understand who we're reaching here. We want to reach the non-commercial market. So the way you do that, looking at the fantastic End User Subsidy Lab reports that are available, that's supply side subsidies and end user subsidies. We know just one will not solve this problem. That's why we feel we are well placed to implement end user subsidies on our already successful supply side subsidy model. Second one is reaching best practice, of course. That explains itself. We also need to understand the minimum level of end user subsidies required to reach everyone. And then we need to partner with the sector in Zambia and across sub-Saharan Africa. So what is the model? How are we going to do this? So the first part is through our schools campaign model that we've done in partnership with the Ministry of Education in 5 countries sort of 6 if you count Senegal, everyone partnering with the Ministry of Education. So essentially, this is our proven model to create initial demand, awareness, trust, availability, and that spark for demand that a rural community needs to grow a solar market and, like I say, this very important demand. So what we do in that, we gather together head teachers, trusted members of the community, educate, show the impact of a solar light, particularly on education. They return back to their communities, promote the impact of solar lights, collect orders, receive commission for that, and we have delivery days. Deliver, depending on the uptake, we'll carry on. So that in a nutshell is that model. We're delivering it through this model because, like I say, we've already overcome the barrier of awareness, availability. Now let's tackle affordability through this model. The only thing we haven't done previously is a more, in addition to lowering the price, is a more deliberate focus on commercialization. Let's ensure that the private sector and profitability can enter and is possible. We're taking a universal approach to these subsidies, implementing on a geographical basis. So what I mean by all of that jargon is essentially the areas in which we'll be implementing these programs. We believe everyone should have access to a solar product. For example, a recent study we've done on the demographics of people in these sorts of areas showed 97% of customers living in extreme poverty. And also some of the logistical challenges that come with smart subsidies or targeted subsidies, we believe are better and more conducive model for commercialization is through universal subsidies. We believe in marketing these well, so the subsidy is clear through promotional discounts. The length of the subsidy will be dictated by uptake, and I'm sure you've read the other ones by now. The business modeling is very important to this if we want to show the impact of Pico Solar as a loss leader. I think one of the key points to focus on now is why Pico Solar and why not solar home subsidies? Well, like I say, we are testing a solar home system subsidy pilot in Malawi at the minute. There's not one size that fits all. But firstly, in terms of Pico Solar, we believe in that we could greatly reduce the level of end user subsidies required. If you look at some of the existing programs, the $20, $50, $90, $120 per product, we could be looking at, say, $1 to $3 to potentially reach 95, 99% of a community. So we're already reducing the cost there. And if we look at this over a multi-year period, where we're encouraging access to tier 1, we also believe that the loss leader could pay itself back over time by being able to sell full price products once the market has reached a certain level of maturity. Impact of Pico solar lights. Of course, this is tier 0, and we want to get to tier 1, but the impact is clear. 60 decibels research shows that this is the most impactful product type of any when talking to the portfolio of over 100 customers. And instant affordable access is key as well, while laying out that journey up the energy ladder for customers, which we do have evidence for, but we believe it needs to be tested further. We know that from the UNCDF Schatz Energy research paper, we know customers buy what's affordable to them. Well, let's provide a whole product portfolio to them and try and bring them up that energy ladder. So where does this take us? We know that, like I say, we want this to spread further than ourselves. We believe in 2 potential end games. One, individual company basis. So where someone can provide Pico Solar, all the products up to tier 1 and beyond. We need to model that and find out the level of end user subsidy, supply side subsidy that is required for profitability. But we also know that not all last mile distributors or solar companies will be able to sell Pico Solar or even want to. It's not necessarily everyone's responsibility to do that. So what if there was a market player like SolarAid in a role we've played before, Kenya and Tanzania, who were there to grow this market, to take it to maturity, then linking to the private sector to then allow for full commercialization within these areas, these private companies. So I'm at 13 minutes, so I am going to make sure that I get done. I've got a couple of minutes left. So this pilot is taking place in Zambia. As you can see, there's a description of the area for you. We have an NPS score of 90 here. So we value a high level of service, and our customers agree that we provide a very high quality service. So we've had one phase of this pilot so far. So I just wanted to go through what we did and what the results were before finishing on our plans moving forward. So this was really an initial pilot to test the mechanism, just to show that our operational teams, and Chandra, I believe you're on here, so hello to you, make sure that they can get these subsidies out in a smooth and effective way. So like I say, this was done through our schools campaign. I've already explained top level what that is. But we sold D-Lite A2s at a 25% discount. And we just wanted to see, did that work for a schools campaign? What did that do to demand? We also had follow-up sales, and we marketed through our usual means, flyers, which also doubled up as a way to collect data for our customers. So the results, we saw, as you can see from this rather squished graph here, we did see a big spike in results. Big spike in sales, excuse me. Sold 1,787 A2s. Previous high through that whole 3-4 year period was 632. And that was at the price of 60 kwacha, down from 85. Follow-up sales, back to 85. We still sold 1,001 A2s. So we know that there are many variables to this, and we intend to dive in a lot deeper to these variables, because it could be the distance between sales. Some of the marketing could have had an impact, but price elasticity through this and through a study we did with ETH Zurich and Acumen a few years ago in Kenya shows that solar products are indeed very price elastic. So we want to lean on that, but also test the other variables within it. So just to finish off, what are we doing now? So you can see that I haven't presented too many results, but now we are in our pre-program engagement, partnerships, and design. So I'm calling on anyone on this call. We're already partnered with 60 decibels to design the most effective pilot possible to prove this long-term business model, but prove the reach as well. And that will be done by not just talking to customers, but non-customers as well. There's a big data gap within this sector of not really understanding who we're not reaching. So we intend to do that here. But we also want to test the long-term business model. How long does a subsidy need to go on for? To what degree? When do we introduce other products upon further sales visits? And mapping that out to know when we're going to reach profitability, commercialization, as we say, the role of Pico Solar as loss leaders. So I've just touched on some of that there. Delivery will be dictated by this design phase we are in now. And like I say, we call on the sector to join us. We're an open book. We believe this and our other model can have significant impacts on reaching almost everyone, if not everyone, with end user subsidies combined with supply side subsidies. And thank you for listening. And there's my email if you want to reach out. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Jamie. And before we go to the next presentation, I want to open it up in case anybody may have an immediate question. We will have a broader Q&A session for interaction, but just to see if there's any immediate questions that somebody would want to ask of Jamie and the Solar Aid team. Any takers on this?
It's either a good or a very bad sign.
I know it's either, I'll take it as a good sign, but maybe I can ask you, Jamie, just for clarification. So loss leader means the first sale was at a loss to Solar Aid?
This will be the interesting thing to explore, Patrick, because, you know, we can, the Pico Solar products, entry-level products, have got to a price point now, which is, we can bring them into the country for say $3.5. So we're talking quite affordable. And the further research will be needed to see that was essentially the 60 kwacha price that I quoted was essentially at cost, but we know that that didn't reach everyone. So within our next phase, we need to test different price points within the area we're at to see the percentage of people we're reaching. So we believe that selling at a loss will be necessary to reach everyone, if not almost everyone, but we need to test that thoroughly to be able to provide the evidence. But we believe at a loss will be necessary to reach the amount of people we want to reach.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will ask in the longer Q&A about how we make that work, especially we still need a commercial market, obviously, for sustainability of the firms, but I'll give you a little time to think about that one. Because yes, a company is saying, let's sell at a loss. So I guess, is there one more chance to anybody that may have an immediate question? Otherwise, I will move on to the next presentation. Any takers on that?
Patrick,
right.
For me,
yes.
Colin,
Go ahead, Colin.
A quick one to Jamie. Any specific attributes? Why did you choose Zambia? Did you have a longer list and then you made a short list, and then at the end of the day you identified or picked Zambia? And why Zambia?
Very good question. So we're directly active at the moment in Malawi and Zambia. So Northwestern province was picked in particular. We've been working there since 2018 in some of the areas. So we have existing evidence of uptake and access for the areas we've already worked in. But we also have some areas where there has been, we believe, no solar access whatsoever. We're talking about areas not connected to the grid. So as well as having areas we have worked in already, selling at retail prices, we also have areas that haven't been reached at all. So we felt like it's a good testing area for us for the pilot we've already done and the pilot we're going to do. And we also, like I say, we have the pilot solar home systems in an energy as a service model we're testing in Malawi. So we will be testing one in each country, and we thought that was fair.
All right, thank you. So thank you very much, Jamie. We will still have a broader Q&A, but at this point, I would like to transition, and I'm going to invite Laza and the team from NG Energy Access to talk about their pilot and what they did in Uganda. So Laza, over to you.
Yes, hi everyone. Yes, so actually I am with Alison presenting, so she's going to take the lead on the presentation, and then I'll take over at some point.
Okay, Alison, we can see you, and I think we can see your screen, so please go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. My name is Alison Bass, and I'm the head of credit operations for NG Energy Access at the global team level. Laza will be taking on part of this presentation as well, and I'll leave it to him to introduce himself a little bit later on. But we're excited to speak to you a bit about something quite complementary to what we just heard from SolarAid around end user subsidies at the level of solar home systems. So just above the Pico level, what it looks like if we pass off price reductions to similarly low income customers for solar home systems, and looking at the context of Uganda in particular. So as a main overview to what we've done and what the key takeaways are, so you can already have it in mind as we go through the rest of the slides. We essentially replicated what an end user subsidy would look like if we reduced prices to entry-level consumers by 20%. This was done in partnership with Signify Foundation and was done in Uganda. Our objective with this experiment, this pilot, was really to build industry insights. This was in order to build a broader body of knowledge on how end user subsidies, if and how end user subsidies can impact not just initial access and connection to energy products, but sustained usage and affordability over time, especially on the hypothesis that this is more sustainable once the price point becomes lower than the average current energy spend on things like kerosene and candles. Laza is going to go a little bit more into the detail of how this design worked for this, but we basically had 2 test groups for the subsidies. So in one instance, we passed off the subsidy through a lower installment or a lower daily rate, and the other through a shorter loan tenor. And this is information that we started to gather in late 2019. So we have over 900 days of data collected so far, and quite interesting results to share. The main highlights of those results is that we did in fact find significant, statistically and practically significant improvement in affordability for both treatment groups. So improved repayment and reduced default. And we'll see a little bit more detail on the facts and figures behind that. We saw that both treatment groups realized increasingly positive results as time went on. So the difference in repayment and the difference in default became more and more apparent over time. Interestingly, all income groups, as measured by PPI, saw improvements in both treatments and statistically significant improvements, but it was the lowest income customers in the lower PPI groups that actually had the most stark improvement in repayment and default. Again, we'll have some detail to come. And then we did want to make a recommendation on how subsidies could be passed on to the end user. And our recommendation based on the findings is to look at reducing the daily installments or reducing the installment size versus shortening the loan tenor. And you'll see why in the slides to come. Great, so just a little bit of background on who we are, what we do, and why we did this. So NG is formerly known as Phoenix and Mobisol, and we work across 9 markets in Africa with over 1.5 million solar home systems sold to date and 750,000 customers in repayment. Uganda is one of our first markets. It's our largest customer base, and it's a market where most of our products are entry-level products. That is, over 50% of our sales are for entry-level solar home systems. And our customers are rural and peri-urban. We wanted to do this work in Uganda because that's where we had been most intentional around pricing near to the current average energy spend. You can see in the graph here where it says Phoenix products, those are now NG product lines that we really worked to get our energy spend, our pricing close to the energy spend line there. And we had already optimized for ourselves where we wanted to have the deposit. So we were interested more in, now that we have a deposit that provides accessibility without too much risk exposure, what next do we want to learn about the pricing that will make this affordable over time? And we already had quite a strong history, like body of knowledge from other price tests and live pricing plans that told us that daily installment size, as it is reduced, also reduces default and improves repayment. But we just didn't know what that looked like if you went even further down below the average energy spend. We also did this on the insight that at around 16 cents per day, this is the average energy spend in Uganda, that about 5 million households, as of the time that we built this study or built this pilot, around 5 million households would have been excluded from affordability for these solar home systems. So we wanted to look at, well, if 7 cents a day could expand access to 3 million households, this would be amazing, but this is about a 50% subsidy and maybe a little bit out of range and out of reasonability. So we looked somewhere closer to a 20% subsidy, which reduces the price to around 13 cents per day, and theoretically could unlock affordability for, in Uganda, at least 1 million households. So this was a starting point for our pilot design, and I'll hand it off to Laza for more detail on how that was set in motion.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Alison. Yeah, so as Alison mentioned, I am Laza. I work within the customer finance department of NG Energy Access. Yeah, so I'm going in details a little bit about the experiment and the result of it. So as Alison mentioned, it was a nationwide experiment. It happened in late 2019 and early 2022. Yeah, we applied 20% subsidy, and I know that there are a couple of academic people here. I have received some requests that, but for the sake of the time and then the average audience, we won't go into much details on the technicalities of the experiment or on the measurements. But yeah, feel free to reach out to us, or if you have time for questions later, we are happy to take you through in much more details. Yeah, so the question was about giving 20% subsidy and through reduced installment or reduced loan tenure. So as the table is showing us here, we have the commercial total purchase price, which is 554K. And the first experiment we ran were to reduce that to 449K UTX by reducing the daily rate from 500 to 400. The second leg of the experiment was same, reducing the total purchase price, but through reducing the loan tenure. And then we were having around 5,000 people in each pricing plan. Okay, so these are the details. So the first metric variable we were looking at is the days logged. For those who are not familiar with it, we are talking about the Pico kit. So whenever customer is not paying, the kit is logged. So days logged is counting the number of days when customer are not paying and don't have access to lights. So that's what we have on the x-axis, the number of days locked. And on the y-axis, we have the percent through loan. So percent through loan is equal to 1 when the loan tenure is reached. So basically, for the reduced daily rate, 1 would be 38 for the treatment. And here 1 would be 28, and this is 35, sorry. Okay, so as what we see here, the blue and the green are the commercial normal pricing plan. So we call them control. The orange and the red are the treatment, where we reduce the daily rate and reduce the loan tenure. So we see over time that the treatments, the reduced pricing plans have been always having less days locked compared to the normal pricing plan. At a point of 85% through loan, we count 40 more days of lights from the treatment. This is more or less the same for loan tenure and daily rate. Yeah, the next metric we were checking at was the default rate. So same configuration of the graph. On the x-axis, we have the default rate, the percent of people defaulting over time, and same on the y-axis, the percent through loan. So same trends as well. We have been seeing less default for a treatment, reduced daily rate, and reduced loan tenure. So at around 85% of through the loan tenure, we see around less 9 point of percentages, less default rate. And as Alison mentioned, the difference is increasing over time, which is quite good to see. Yeah, the next thing we were looking at was about the impact based on income level of the customers. So we put some buckets here. We could go into more details also if you're interested, but here we put like the lowest income level. We measured the income level by the PPI, probability poverty index. Okay, so the lowest income level has 81% probability of living under 3.1 dollars a day. So for this customer, the reduced pricing plan made them reduce the number of days locked by 54. Okay, against the other income level buckets, we see that as a lower, and the difference is 15. So the lowest income level customer have been 15 more days of lights. Okay, next thing we were looking at, and I think the question we wanted to answer eventually is where to pass the subsidy through a reduced daily rate or reduced loan tenor. So here we have the days locked over days locked over days on book. So the days on book is like the number of days the customer have been with the kit since they bought it, of course, yeah. And the percent through loan tenor is what I just explained. So when we take into account the number of days locked over days on book, we have a higher, actually a less days locked for reduced loan tenor. The difference is about 20 days locked between the two experiments. And for the days locked, we have less days locked for a loan tenor, around 5, like the latest data we have. And then for the days on book, we feel we think that this is felt more by the customer than the person through loan, because on days on book they pay on a daily basis, and it really depends on how you want to see the things, where you want to decide, I think. And we also see reduced loan tenor as a faster completion, quite mechanic, because it has a 28 months loan tenor. But then the daily rate, the reduced daily rate, have a slower default, higher percent paid over time, and higher impact on lower income customer. So yeah, that's why we are recommending the reduced daily rate, knowing the aim of the study and the way what we want to achieve here. Yeah, thank you. Now we are on the takeaways and recommendation, and I think I give it back to Alison. Thank you.
Great. So we did find from our pilot research that the daily energy rates, if priced below the average energy spend, can unlock longer term affordability. And we do think that this is true, that it could be applicable for more than 1 million households in Uganda, and certainly millions of households across Africa to potentially take the same approach. At the time that we started this pilot, a lot of RBF programs, a lot of subsidy programs were largely talking about connections or subsidizing sales. But at the time, we're not looking specifically at longer term payment and defaults in the Pico models. So the more that we can incorporate this longer term view in subsidy schemes and results-based financing schemes to look at repayment over time, the better it is really for the customers who are meant to receive the promise of energy rather than just a connection. And we would recommend basically for those schemes to look towards the daily costs and the comparison of the daily costs against existing energy spend to understand how well what the repayment might look like for the subsidized program. We did find in this pilot that it's the lowest income Ugandan households, or the lower income households that we had served, who benefited the most from the lower daily cost. This was not necessarily expected, but it was really great to see it, because this is obviously the most difficult to serve and the most expensive to serve group, especially the more rural they are and the farther away from grid services they may be. So this points to a strong value proposition if we can price to existing energy spend, especially for this group, and would be the ideal target for a subsidy program as well. So there's good natural, it's kind of a natural match that's happening there. At the same time, all of these reduced prices could theoretically be passed on commercially. But right now, given market conditions, subsidies may really be the only way for Pico companies to go below the existing cost of energy, given the fact that, at least in the Uganda context, from that graph we showed earlier, most kits were being sold above the average energy spend. Most PAYGO companies are working on commercial sustainability. And the upside of reduced default doesn't quite doesn't quite offset the reduction in revenue. So we did make some additional recoveries and repayment, additional collections, but the reduction in revenue isn't fully offset from this, so it can't be commercially covered fully. And then the reality is that for the PAYGO sector and many other sectors, supply chain costs and inflation pressures have actually put upward pressure on our COGS, our pricing, et cetera, that are often needing to be absorbed by the customer and making it more commercially challenging to compete with or be better than the prices of alternatives. And in fact, during the pilot, many PAYGO companies increased daily rates, including Engie, and others have simply exited the PAYGO space because of challenges in credit risk and sustainability. So we do really believe that this is a powerful tool to increase long-term access to life-changing renewable energy. We do think that it will be impactful for lower income households, but we do suggest learning more. We will have final results of the pilot in another 6 months with full outcomes. We would definitely recommend, we would love to be part of this, or recommend that others explore repeating this in other market contexts, potentially with other entry-level solar home systems, repeating it in a non-COVID scenario. So we didn't know that was coming, but that was part of this pilot group. Testing also ways to reduce barriers to entry and barriers to uptake. That wasn't part of this specific design, so it was pretty homogeneous groups in the treatment and the control. So we weren't targeting lower income segments per se. It might be also interesting to look at subsidies for around productive use assets, because we were strictly focused on kind of core home energy use. Excuse me. And I think it's also important that the industry practitioners, we recognize that governments and policymakers, et cetera, have historically had some concerns of supply side subsidies. So we also have to really make our case and prove ourselves to be worthy custodians of these subsidies to the end users, if it is going to be passed on through the work that we do. I'm sure there will be more questions. We'd be happy to cover them in Q&A, or happy to receive an email or note from you and take the conversation from there as well.
Thank you very much. And I know I can already see the questions coming in fast and furious. So thank you so much for everybody for what you've already put in. So I guess maybe both to the, to all three of you. I know one of the questions that has started is been raised is the impact in terms of growth of sales. Jamie, I know one of your graphs did show that climb in sale, but if you could touch just a little bit on that, and then Alison and Laza, if we can just start off in terms of that impact on sales. And then a follow-up also for both of you, which I think is spoken to in terms of some of the numbers that you've spoken. I think Jamie talked about, school kids and all. Alison and Laza, you've talked about the PPI. How are you targeting, or what's a methodology for targeting, or would this be just general subsidies to everybody who walks up to you? So please feel free, any of you, to start.
I don't mind going first. Okay, so on the question of sales, so there's two elements to this. The first one is, yes, there is a clear spike in sales when offering a lower than full retail price product, Pico solar product, to an end user. Like I said in the presentation, price elasticity in Pico solar products is well established. So the insights we got there was in our phase 1 pilot, fantastic. The first instance, we know if we reduce the price, sales will go through the roof, fantastic. What we need to explore in phase 2 to really understand this is twofold. One, who did we not reach at certain price points? What was the penetration in these communities when going, $1 less, $2 less, $3 less, for example? That's our interest here, is universal access, not reaching, 10% more people, 20% more people, 100% is the interest. So that's dealing with it in the first instance, what we want to understand initially. Then secondly, the key to this model, what we're trying to test, and what we've proven to a lesser extent in our work in Kenya and Tanzania, is when going into an area of market failure with Pico solar products, what happens to the market creation there? What happens to catalyze demand and allow sales over time of more expensive full price products? So yes, we know Pico solar sales will spike in the first instance when reducing the price, but like we said earlier, how does that act as a loss leader for a company? How does that lead to tier 1 sales? This is what we want to track in our pilot. So I'll leave that one there and go over to the NG guys.
Okay, Laza, Alison?
Great. So in our study, we were not actually trying to drive sales. We were in fact trying to we capped sales in each of the control and treatment groups, because we'd already, similarly to what Jamie is saying, we already knew the dynamics of if we lower the deposit, we will have higher sales. That was proven again and again. And every single, I think, company in the Pico space uses it as a sales growth tool. So for us, we kept the deposit exactly the same at 29,000 shillings, which for us was where we leveled off really the right level of accessibility and credit risk. We saw the treatment groups were all, around 4,600, and that was by intention. What we did not design for in this pilot would be to see, how that lower total cost to the customer would change the purchasing decision over time. We ran this in very quick sprints. The team didn't even know that this was going to happen. So basically it was regular commercial pricing. And then Sunday at midnight, there was an SMS that, as of tomorrow, we have a new commercial price. And they had no idea how long they were going to have it either. And then it was turned off after 5,000 sales were reached. So this was meant not to boost sales or change decision-making for the customer per se. It was really strictly to see how the repayment would play out over time. But just definitely to Jamie's point, there's a very clear curve of upfront cost reduction and uptake, which is not terribly surprising.
Okay, so I'm going to remind everybody, if you want to ask your question directly, please raise your hand. We will allow you a chance to pose your question. But in the meantime, we do have a number of questions on the chat. And there's a question that's been posed by Lou Kimari. And this is asking about, is looking into the length and the amount of the subsidy, right? With a pilot, should that also go hand in hand with product redesign for different markets and subgroups? And I would believe that may be trying to look at reducing the cost of the COGS for those products. I don't know if you guys have considered that at all.
Yes, so from I think I understood the question, so I tried to answer it in the chat. So let me go with how I interpreted it. So, I mean, we've been trying, when we first started selling Pico solar products, they were $25 to sell retail. I'm sure many of you on the call will remember those days. And the price of components, etc., solar cells have come down over time. We've really been pushing, as a lot of companies have, manufacturers, we, of course, from the distributor side, but work with manufacturers, to try and get the most affordable products we can. So that is, of course, our first priority, is to have the most affordable full price products. But that's why we're here, because even $4 solar light will not reach the types of communities, the end user, the lowest income, last mile communities we're trying to reach. So that's where subsidies come in. And then additionally into the point around new product offers, etc. So how we are marketing this to our customers, and have done for a while, but now we really want to measure it at more significant reductions, is we have special promotional discount sales. We have customer contacts, we work through the head teachers, and we make it very clear that this is not a forever price. And the length of subsidy within our next phase pilots will be discovered for, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there, will be figured out in terms of uptake. So of course, you know, if we only sell 1% of products, there's so many variables here. So the length we can't say now, but yeah, every element is key. Full price, working with products first, but we're at the point now where we have to focus on subsidies.
Okay. Listen, Laza, and I believe I'll tweak the question a little bit for you. Should we, you know, if I take the question and interpret it a little further, is should we be, or should the private sector be looking at designing lower cost products? Is that the answer?
So yes, and actually we used this internally to pitch what we were calling an ultra affordable product. And in fact, it became the catalyst, or it gave the product team the green light to go ahead and design a new entry-level product with the objective of reducing the price to the end consumer by 20%. So while we were also trying to figure out if there were, you know, subsidy partnerships that could help us get there, we did exactly what you guys have suggested here, to look at, well, where is our where can we step in to further reduce costs. This is again in the context of COVID, so it was a little bit heartbreaking to us that all of the good work to price down the cost of our product and make really tough decisions on what we would want to sacrifice in experience based off of additional affordability was at least partially wiped out by the increase in the supply chain costs. So we didn't get to realize all of the COGS reductions and the cost reductions that we had hoped to. It's actually mostly just kept us on par with where we were before. So it's a bit heartbreaking for us, but I think that is important, that companies, especially if they do want to have subsidies, have to demonstrate that they're continuously committed to reducing their own cost basis, whether it's the cost of their product or the cost of their service, et cetera, and be partners in that process, be open about how much progress they are or aren't making on that front. And unfortunately, we did not make all the progress that we had hoped to on that product COGS basis.
Okay, so let me go to a different question that's been asked, which and this is about targeting. I know, you know, Jamie, when you started, you referenced a commercial alongside a commercial marketplace. And Alison, I know you've indicated for you guys, it wasn't really targeted per se. But from your experience, and here we're talking about obviously mechanisms where we are reducing the cost, either the upfront payment or the loan term or that daily payment for the customer. From your experience, would we lean towards making this available for the broader market? Would we look at how do we better target it, or how do we see those coexisting without undermining the commercial marketplace? Because I believe at the same time you're doing this, you were still selling products alongside it. So I'd really just love to get your thoughts and feedback on that. And for everybody else, I do encourage you, post a question or raise your hand.
Yeah, so I'll jump in first again on this one. So for us, we're going to work in universal subsidies, so available to everyone within geographical ranges. So of course, it's not going to be a whole country where everyone gets the same cost product, but gathering demographic data within a certain area, we believe that, and these are, like I say, the most rural, lowest income areas in Zambia we're working. So it might be slightly different to what some existing subsidy pilots that are already around. So that's how we're going to oh, I can hear myself. That's how we're going to implement, really, is universal. And by looking at the Gogler surveys with private companies, that is the approach that is championed by most companies that fed back, was a universal geographical approach. We believe the complexity of smart subsidies or targeted subsidies with what we're trying to do could be too costly and too difficult. So we want to try this. And we also believe that it's a very good brand builder by selling products to as many people as possible. And like I say, the demographics of these areas need solar because there is not really solar at all in these areas. So if someone has a little bit more money but no access, we still believe in getting that to them. And we will be testing, and this is where feedback from the sector is so important for this pilot. Please feed in the concerns, because we understand the concerns, but the evidence of market spoilage, I've struggled to really find any at the moment. But we want to build something that shows universal approach to subsidies within certain areas is the most effective way, if it is. So yeah, join us, provide evidence, and we'll build a great pilot.
Yeah, and then from the NG perspective, we didn't really have a strong vision for what this should look like per se. We're currently working with the subsidy program, or I believe it's called a subsidy program with Rwanda, where it's actually the vetting is done by the Rwandan government to confirm that those who qualify for the subsidy in fact fall into certain categories that ought to qualify. So they basically do the confirmation against a pre-qualified list. That's one option. Generally speaking, we tend to, in a where we set the rules, we tend to just offer the price and invite anybody who wants to pay that price to come and make that purchase and own the product, without really limiting that. I think especially we're trying to be more and more inclusive on the lowest income levels. So it feels a little bit icky to me to kind of start excluding and including folks. But for sure, if there's a particular subsidy program that's supposed to reach particular people, and if it needs to be screened, if that's just part of that funder's program, there are ways to work on that. There's just certain cost elements to it that are going to need to be borne by someone, either the company or the organization that's doing the funding or the implementing partner. And if the trade-off of having additional operating costs versus maybe additional subsidies that you can give away is the right trade-off to make, then you can, then maybe sometimes screening customers is the better choice.
All right. So a very pertinent question from Sega Mengiste. She asked, I think, is subsidies possible for the companies without any external financial assistance?
So let me, unless I've gone first every time. Do you guys want to go first this time?
Sure. I mean, there's just a certain point where I think every business has its target margins and its target cash flow, and a certain point below that, the business is unsustainable, either from a cash basis or from a profitability basis. And once you start pricing below those margins, the business is either losing money or making its cash too slowly. So to get to a pricing level that's below what's commercially viable, that's where we're saying that subsidies are really part of that equation. The other part is, again, seeing is there anything else that we can do to reduce costs, so that we're just messing with that side of the equation. That's still very important. We did find in our subsidy price test that we could reduce the cost of default by having this $20, 20% subsidy, but the benefit of the reduced default didn't cover the cost of the subsidy, at least in our pilot. So it wasn't a one-to-one trade-off just on the improved repayment. You'd have to find more upside in another area as well. So I think in general, we're talking about getting the cost lower than could be commercially viable. But it's an important point to keep raising, like what is a company doing actually to try to sustain their margins but reduce their costs?
Yeah, the answer from my side, the honest answer is, firstly, we don't know. That's what we're trying to test in this second phase pilot. But from what we do know, it will be really, really difficult to be successful without any form of subsidy, because what we're talking about in our work is both supply side and end user subsidy. So it will be difficult. But what we are doing is we're going to be modeling many different scenarios based on different amounts of supply side, necessary amounts of supply side and end user subsidy. But part of this model is to test we have the two end games we brought up. One was on an individual company basis. So this does and probably will lean more towards the companies that have a wider product portfolio. But say you can sell Pico Solar at a loss, having trust that you'll be bringing customers up the energy ladder to higher value products. Well, if you can take that risk in the first instance, we want to try and prove that there will be a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, to use a really awful phrase, but that there is a long-term business benefit to doing that. So that's the first side of this model we want to test, is on an individual company basis. But another element is, we're a whole ecosystem here. We're a whole off-grid energy sector. So there are collective elements here that we can bring to benefit others. So an organization, a market catalytic organization that doesn't have to focus on profit like SolarAid, Sunny Money. What if we're working in these more rural areas of market failure, low-income families, implementing these Pico Solar end user subsidy schemes, and then bringing the market to a certain level of maturity where the private sector can come in and capitalize on the demand. So within that instance, you wouldn't necessarily need subsidies for your company because someone would have managed it for you. So we're looking at both elements here, but long story short, it will be difficult, but we're going to map it out. We'll see.
Right. I think you kind of preempted a question here from Wim, which is asking, so if one company decides to sacrifice that first income by the loss leader, but it's a competitive marketplace, how would you respond to that? So are you pushing for the existence of some type of organization that would be the vehicle for that beginning, or what?
So there's two sides to it. So one is, you're absolutely right, Patrick, it's that side of things, is who can come in and play that catalytic role where a company doesn't want to have to sell at a loss. That is a risk. But say a company did, there's one side of it which is an end user subsidy. What if that discounted price, you selling at a loss, well, your loss has been covered by a government, a funder, a multilateral, whoever. So then you're not taking the risk. Someone is affording you the opportunity to take that risk. So there's that element of it. That's where an end user subsidy could come in. And the supply side subsidies associated as well. But say you did want to take the risk and sell at a loss. Well, let's take an example and I think I saw Charlotte Hepper here, D-Light. Let's take SolarAid in Kenya previously. So we were selling S1s at the time. This was a long time ago, and selling in areas where there were no demand, building demand for solar products. And then D-Light were able to come in when the market had reached a certain level of maturity and almost take over. And within the Kenyan population, the term D-light became synonymous with solar light. That they were referred to as D-lights. And the point I'm trying to make here is, yes, there is a financial risk, but we believe there is strong trust in solar products, specifically your branded solar products, and a benefit to your brand if you are the ones and you have a first mover advantage within these areas. So there's a whole bunch of answers there, but there are potential benefits within each one, and we're going to explore every one of them.
Thank you. I see, Colin, you had your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, for me, this is to Jeremy. So when you are talking about the first loss, that the first kind of sale that is meant, you incur a loss, how much loss are you talking about?
Yeah, no, good question. This is going to be completely dependent on how we reach the percentage of the population we want to reach. So I can't answer that right now, and it will depend every time we want to do this within a certain geographical area. It will depend on the need of the people. We want to reach 100% of people within these areas. Our phase 2 pilot, we want to do that. We know that there won't be 100% is of course very difficult to do. We know that, but say we can get to 95% at a certain price point, which within these products, we're only talking say $1 to $3 reduction per product. That's not much of a subsidy to be provided compared with other pilots. So that's an impossible question to answer, but we're here to maximize impact. So we'll see.
Okay. So maybe going back to the questions, I think if we change a little bit from the focusing of the selection, Annette asked a question around this change in consumer behavior, particularly less defaults, higher repayments. Is it only really directly attributed to those lower payments? Was it better credit management, more relationship management, and what more could you attribute to that change of behavior? I think Alison and Laza.
Yeah, I could jump in and feel free to listen, but yeah, that's we were not able to take the conclusion we wanted to if we changed the other aspects of the pricing plans, how do we sell the product, or even on the customer social demographic. So yeah, that's what we tried. So in this experiment, we tried that it's just a result of the reduced pricing plan, but yeah, in a like a general term, better credit management, operation, customer selection, I would also bring something similar. But then if you have that as a background, you could still have another subsidy, and at the end of the day, we're getting better.
Yeah, and the way that the treatment and the control were designed, these were sales that happened nearly back to back. And again, nothing else was changed other than the pricing, and the pricing was by surprise for the sales team. We really tried to limit any difference in customer selection, any difference in behavior on the part of any of our team members, et cetera. And then because they were sold to within a very similar time frame, they essentially had parallel journeys. They were all sold to in late 2019, early 2020. They all went through COVID lockdowns. They all went through the same kind of economic restrictions. They received the same types of messages from us. They received the same types of rewards or promotional offers, et cetera. So there really wouldn't be any distinction in their customer journey and account management based on the sales price or the whether they were in the control or treatment group. And I think that shows up in Laza will need to speak to this, but the fact that all of the results are statistically significant are kind of driving home the point that we can actually isolate that this was due to the difference in the treatment pricing plan versus the control. But
So
please
we are coming
repeat this
to the-
experiment
yeah.
to, please repeat it to see if it will
No.
bear out in other contexts.
Yeah. So we're coming to the last few minutes of the webinar. And the one question I've not asked, right? So I think both your organizations are validating that, one, there is a need or there's use for end user subsidies, and the private sector can make it work. But you've not really spoken to, when we look at the lab and the partners here and obviously the public sector, what do we need, or what would you need to make it work from either partners or the governments to scale? What are the recommendations or the asks you would have?
Yeah, I'll go. Great question. Thanks for teeing me up there, Patrick. So, like I say, this is open source. We're testing this model for Pico Solar, leading to the customer's journey up the energy ladder, universal access. We're testing energy as a service with solar home systems in the most rural part of Malawi successfully at the moment. We've had great early consultations with the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Energy in Malawi with that model already. We're looking to do similar in Zambia with the Zambian government. But this is something we want to travel much wider than just the direct countries we're in. So if there's anyone who wants to input on a research basis, on a design basis, or wants to learn something, has a concern, or wants to join together in sharing results or providing funding, because of course a pilot done in the right way takes money. So I am shameless. I'm going to put it out there here. It costs money to deliver this stuff, and we think this is within the best interest, not just of the off-grid energy sector, but genuinely achieving universal energy access. That's why we exist. But if we can show it not just reaching everyone, but reaching everyone in a way which is conducive to market growth, market maturity, and long-term commercial success, that's what we're going to do. So if that sounds interesting to you, email me and would love to chat further. So thanks for that.
Alison?
Great. Well, I am not our policy person. So Diane, if you're on the chat and you want to put a different statement in the chat, please go ahead. But yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting actually to learn more about what Jamie's been doing and their organization as well, because I think basically there's a groundswelling from the operators themselves to say we need subsidies, and we're each trying to find like-minded partners, whether, from whatever area of the industry you're coming from. Do you believe the same? Do you want to explore this with us? What resources do you have to bring to bear? All are really welcome. Cash is helpful. At the end of the day, a subsidy is essentially cash as well. So ultimately, if we're talking about end user subsidies at scale, even just the example in Uganda, if we really wanted to say, let's scale this concept of what we did in Uganda to 1 million households, that's $20 million. So there's somewhere between the kind of baby steps that we're taking, where we had great partnership from Signify Foundation, which helped us de-risk a bit of this experiment, really, and also it was light risk for them, to getting all the way through this kind of consortium type of process to widespread subsidies that benefit all of the energy players in the market, but more importantly, benefit all of the people who otherwise wouldn't have access to that affordable energy. So basically, any interest is welcome, any resources are useful, and I'll definitely throw out there the same offer that Jamie had, that if you are interested, we are too, and let's talk.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. I think we are at the end of the webinar. We're supposed to run until 20 past. Please do join me in thanking Alison, Laza, and Jamie from ENGIE and Solar Aid for this presentation. We will be developing a paper from this that will be available in the End User Subsidy Lab portal on the Gogla website. We also do invite you to join us in the October Global Off-Grid Forum to be held in Kigali, where we will be talking much more about everything that we're doing to make sure we keep on track for SDG 7, industry innovations, support scheme, investment, everything else that's online there. So if you've not registered or you're not aware, please do sign up. It's on the Gogla website. But thank you so much. Thank you to our partners, NDEV, ACE staff, Lighting Global, and the ESMA program for the work that you do to continue supporting us. And everybody, please have a good afternoon and the rest of your day. Thank you. And thank you also to our team at Gogla for the support in putting this together. Thank you.